Everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing my review for The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 6, Tribe. In this episode, of course, we got Wookiees, we got Kashyyyk, we got a lightsaber, which is really cool. Always love seeing a lightsaber pop up no matter what. But Gungi makes his return. I know people were losing their minds. For me, it was like, I barely remember him. I barely remember most stuff, honestly, from Clone Wars. It's been a long time. It was a lot of episodes, a lot of seasons. Love it. But, you know, I don't remember everything. But people are like, Gungi's coming back. Everybody's super hyped. And it was a good episode. I feel like this one for sure, considering, you know, kind of the relationship that they made with the Wookiees in this episode, could lead to some of the bigger stuff. You either, especially because I've done this review late, today's episode is like a two-parter. So they put out 2 episodes at once. No idea if it's going to have any connection to this one. I kind of doubt it. I feel like it might be something where, you know, Rex kind of pops up, but they could easily make a callback, you know, down the line, no problems whatsoever. And it's like, boom, here's a callback to when they helped out the Wookiees. Here's Gungi, of course, being a Jedi, or, you know, at least a Jedi in training. Here's why he feels, you know, so gung-ho about, you know, possibly helping them out on, you know, whatever this mission ends up being that might come up later. So they could easily tie this into something else that comes up later down the line in the season. And I would not be surprised at all if they did. But even on its own, it was a fun episode. It still wasn't, you know, like the craziest impactful thing ever, but I would definitely say it was more impactful than some of the stuff we got in the past, you know, couple of episodes. Mostly because I actually went to Kashyyyk. They formed a legitimate bond, you know, being clones and then be like, hey, we're not a part of, you know, what's going on with the Empire, and, you know, them kind of having that connection. And so that could lead them, you know, if, you know, for whatever reason, maybe the Wookiees reach out to them and then they can reach out to Rex and be like, okay, we kind of need you to help them because they helped us one time, or we, you know, all this sort of just bringing different characters and groups together. And so we'll see how that ends up playing out. Obviously, they could connect to it now. As far as this season's concerned, they could wait until the next season, honestly. They could do it in a totally different show. Who knows what's going to happen? They could make another CG show and just be like, surprise, we're doing a Wookiee show. Who knows what can happen with Star Wars? But I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a nice, fun ride. I like the action. I like the way they took out the final villain was super effed up, because technically it was a cool way to do it, because it was like, oh, you know, if you don't attack the spiders, they don't attack you. And so they had that with Gungi. They had like their whole ring of fire, and it was like, okay, how's this gonna play out? They're going back and forth. He cuts his weapon and stuff, his flamethrower, and so the spiders drop down. He cuts off his lightsaber. It's like, oh, okay, tying back into what they referenced early on, like they no longer see him as a threat, so they kind of calm down. And of course the other dude doesn't realize this, and so he's punching these big ass spiders. And then they're like, all right, well, let's just string this dude up and then just carry him off into the trees. And he's screaming. And I'm just like, that has got to be one of the worst ways I've ever seen anyone die in Star Wars. Like, obviously we don't see him die, but it's like, that's what's going to happen. Like, spiders take you up to a web and then they eat you alive. That's not a good way to go. And considering they have like just little snappy beak things, it probably won't be fast. So that was just a crazy way for him to die. Also, I'm pretty sure they did this on purpose. But for anyone who is unfamiliar with the most recent set of Star Wars games with Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor coming out, which, if you did not know, IGN has like 8 minutes of gameplay for anyone who might be interested in that, because the game was recently delayed. They got like 8 minutes of gameplay. I don't know if that's why they got the gameplay, but they have like 8 or 9 minutes worth of gameplay you guys can check out. I'm probably going to stay away from it. I've been doing that a lot lately with games I'm getting hyped for. I'm like, I'm trying to just stand back and then just go all in. Like when it actually comes out, I'll watch like a launch trailer, or if it's like a super behind the scenes thing, I'll watch that. But if it's just straight up gameplay of like a segment, I tend to skip it, because I'm like, I don't really want to see anything. I kind of just want everything to be brand new. But for anyone who might be interested, just a random little thing there. But in Jedi Fallen Order, you go to Kashyyyk as well, and it's very different. Those spiders look like straight up spiders. They're just giant. They're like really huge. Like the web sacks are just like absolutely gargantuan. So I feel like they did that on purpose. They could easily be like, yeah, this is a different species of the type of spider, you know, obviously to make it simpler. But it's like, I think they did that on purpose, because the spiders in those games just look like giant spiders. And I feel like they didn't really want to do that in full on CG and like freak people out. Like this show, not just because it's animated, but just the tone of this show is much more geared towards kids than some of the other Star Wars stuff that we've had, including, you know, like Clone Wars. Rebels, I would say, certainly was early on, and I feel like that kind of did the same thing Clone Wars did originally, where it's like, it starts off a lot campier, kind of getting its footing, and then it's like, what if we got real serious though? And then it starts to get very serious as it goes down the line. Bad Batch, I still feel, is like that simple middle ground. It's not as lighthearted as probably what Resistance was. I still haven't even seen Resistance. But it's probably not as lighthearted as that. It's certainly not as lighthearted as like, like the Force of Destiny shorts and things like that. Those are actually really good too. Some of those get pretty deep, but it's simpler, but it's also not as simple as some of those, and it's not as intense, obviously, as like later Clone Wars and obviously some of the live action stuff we got. But in this, I was like, that is 100% why they did not make those spiders look like they do in the game. Because I'm like, I'm sure somewhere, either Legends or brand new canon, they've had those species pop up somewhere in comics or something. And I'm like, if they were in the game, that's canonical. But they made like, all right, that species looks like really scary spiders over there, but over here in the Bad Batch, this is a different species of spiders, and they kind of just have like little bird beaks on the front, and that's not that crazy. Like they look weird and stuff, and they got like tube bodies, but that's not that crazy. But I'm like, before they got there, I saw those webs. I was like, are they really gonna do this? And they didn't, because I was genuinely curious, because they're, people do not like spiders. I personally do. I'm weird, I guess, but people really don't like spiders. So I was very curious when they showed the spider webs. I was like, are they really going this far? And they don't. So I think that was a smart choice, just because like you'd be freaking out a bunch of people, kids and adults. Like it doesn't matter. It's not just like you'd be freaking out the kids watching the show. You'd be freaking out everybody. I would have been like, holy crap, they did it, and I would have loved it. But I understand that they did not go with like the full-on giant spider look, 8 eyes, and all that good stuff. I get it. I would have liked to have seen it, but I understand. Like that would have been all over Twitter. If they did that, this would have been the most famous episode of Bad Batch that was ever released. If they did like those full-on spiders, I guarantee it. But they kept it simple, and I was like, okay, that totally makes sense. But going through the episode, it was definitely entertaining. It might be more important later down the line, because of course they team up with Wookiees and they help them understand like not every single clone is still working for the Empire. It's like, no time to really explain it, with Gunji. It's like, but look, we're cool, everything's fine, we're gonna help you guys out. We used to help you before, and we're gonna do it now. So they do end up finding more clones. I totally forgot what is it, Trandoshans, I believe was the name of the species that they fight, like the main dude and his buddies. But they fight some of them. They have like the separatist tanks and stuff. They take out some of the tanks. They do a lot of digging in this, because stuff keeps getting set on fire. So it's like, we got to get the shovels and dig ditches so that the fire can't keep spreading. They do that like 2 or 3 times in the episode. But it's like, okay, this was a fun episode. They referenced kind of really, basically it's the Force. Like there's always a million different ways that the Force gets referenced in Star Wars, where it'll be like they go to some random planet and it's like, yeah, they do this thing and they talk to this thing, and it's like, oh, that's the Force. They just call it something else. It's all over the place. And so in this, they actually kind of commune with the trees, because the trees are alive. It's the Force is within every living thing, or it has a high midichlorian count. We'll just go with the classic, the Force is in every living thing. So they talk with the trees, and the trees actually come up with a plan. So they work with the planet itself, and they totally sacrifice the spiders, by the way. The trees were like, yeah, all right, so we'll bring them in, we'll sacrifice the spiders. Like they're cool, but like, like spiders. So I guess the planet was just like, I like them, but not as much as I like you guys. So they sacrificed a bunch of the spiders and send them out as a swarm. But it was cool the way it was handled. I like how they did that. There was one moment when they first charged down on them, and then the Wookiees kind of do like their cheer. It was funny, but it was also kind of effed up, because they cheer and there's 2 Wookiees on whatever the thing is. It's like, it almost looked like a giant cat. There's 2 Wookiees on it. They pounce down on like one person. They do their thing. It's like, the dude on the back got shot instantaneously. I was like, they just started, and they stopped to do like a chant, like, yeah, like battle roar. And it's like, yep, and he was gone. I was like, that's effed up. But it's also kind of funny. It's like, you don't stop and do a war chant in the middle, but it's supposed to kind of scare people, but it did not work that time. It was like, and it was like they killed one of them instantaneously. I was like, it's really funny to me, but it was also kind of effed up, because like that was the very beginning. They did 1 pounce and they like roared, and they were like, oh, okay, boom, like we got a shot off, we good. And I was like, that was effed up, but it was realistic. It was like somebody was not scared. They pulled that trigger and they got a shot off. So made me laugh a little bit, but I was also like, those kind of effed up. I guess that's why you don't pause to roar in the middle. I know what it was meant to do, but it didn't work. It didn't work that time. But they go through, of course they win. It has to be that way. And Gunji goes off with his people, and then obviously the team goes off on its own. But I think for sure they're gonna tie this in later into the series. If not this season, then definitely later on in the season, or later on in the series with multiple seasons. So I'm curious how it will affect it, because it's a huge thing to have, just be like, hey, let's go help out the Wookiees again, or hey, the Wookiees need help, but we can't do enough. Maybe we call in Rex, and that's how they get that together. Or, they're helping Rex, and it's like, hey, we can call in some other people who might be interested in helping us out to, you know, kind of make this work. And then we got like a small army of Wookiees coming in to help out, you know, the crew. So there's a lot of ways they can utilize that. I thought for sure they kind of teased it like a very small bit, but for sure they had Omega like touching the tree and bending down and stuff. And I was like, I wonder how hard they're gonna go with it, because I was curious, like, what are they gonna do with her? They haven't gone too far into the clone thing. We still have not seen Boba Fett, and I am waiting for that episode. And I think a lot of people are, because it's like, okay, in this era of Star Wars, we have a young Boba Fett, and he has all these clones, all these brothers and stuff out there. His father's dead, and then he could find out that he has a sister. And it's like there's so much they could do with that. I'm sure they're saving that. They're probably working on that behind the scenes. But I'm like, I'm still waiting for that stuff. So there's a lot that they can do. But I was like, are they going to make her Force sensitive? And that would be very interesting, because if she's Force sensitive, how could everyone else not be? Because they're literally genetically bred from the same person. But at the same time, she is not, you know, obviously she's a girl compared to every other person who's an exact clone. So there's something different there. We still don't know the exact reference of who the other person is or how exactly they did that, because I don't think they really explained it in the first season. Like, oh, what is it that, you know, is it just that they just changed it and it was just like, we can, you know, it's Star Wars science, we can just switch this and then boom, you're a girl? Or is there something else to it where there are actually two donors and she's less of a clone and more of an actual child? Because I don't think they really get too far into the detail. They say she's a clone, but it's like, okay, but she's a clone that's a girl, and there's a difference there. So how'd that happen? And they haven't really like deep dived into that. So there's a lot of potential there. But it was like, okay, you know, she was kind of just joining him to do it, you know, leaning up against the tree. But I was like, I don't know. This is the first time I honestly hadn't even thought about it before, but this was genuinely the first episode where I was like, oh, they could actually hint towards her being Force sensitive. Even if they don't go really hard with it, it could be super simple, like very base level stuff. Because, you know, the Force is in all living things. But I'd be curious to see where they go with it. I am curious, but this was definitely the first episode, excuse me, for me personally, where I actually thought like they might actually do that. I always thought they would keep it simple, and the fact that she's already like the female clone / daughter of Jango Fett is more than enough to be like, what the F happens to her in the future? But if they add on, you know, Force sensitivity, that's, you know, that's like quite a few extra layers to throw on top of that character. So we'll see what happens, but that was definitely interesting to me. It was like, I hadn't thought of it before. I'm sure there's been other hints where I just didn't really make the connection or like see it as a reference, but in this one for sure, it was like them straight up talking to the trees and just some of the stuff they did, like with the kids kind of teaming up and stuff like that. It was like, interesting. So it popped into my head. Maybe it's always been there. Even in season 1, there's some stuff I just wasn't noticing, but in this one, I was like, seems like they're kind of hitting me on the head with it. Like, oh, you know, hey, it could happen, could not happen. Might just be throwing this in there just because. But I enjoyed that. I was like, all right, I like the mystery. The fact that she's a clone as is her unique circumstance, like I said, is more than enough for me already. And then you can throw the Force on top of that, and it's like, I'm not gonna hate it. So we'll see what happens. Maybe, you know, I keep saying it, but Ahsoka's gonna pop up at some point. She has to. Like, it just makes sense. Or especially with her show coming up, is like they're gonna throw Ahsoka in. So we'll see what happens with it. But enjoyed this episode. Today's episode was a 2-parter, so I'm very excited to see that. Obviously, for you guys, you probably already saw it if you're checking this out, but if not, I would love to know your theories on that and what the 2-parter is going to be. I don't think it'll tie into this episode. I think it'll just be its own next set of missions. Maybe this is where Rex will finally show up for the season. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, because if they're doing 2 episodes at once, there's a reason for that. We only got it in the very beginning. We're getting it now, and I think the season finale is like both episodes are going to premiere on the same day. So I'm very excited to see what these 2 episodes are, because everything else has been 1 week at a time. Also, if it's a 2-parter, we might be getting like a really good deep episode, which I've been waiting for. This, I'd say, was kind of close, mostly due to the fact that it was like, okay, it's a young Jedi who's escaped Order 66. They went back to Kashyyyk, which is very important with the Wookiees, and them pseudo referencing the Force and like the living environment and working with the trees and stuff like that, and like the environment or like the planet itself being a living thing, and the trees literally sharing that space with the Wookiees. I think they even referenced the fact that technically, like, it was something like, I forgot how they phrased it, but in some ways she explained it. It was almost like the Wookiees were the guests and the trees were the natives. In that sense, it was like I forgot exactly how it was phrased. I wish I could remember exactly, but the way it was kind of done was like, oh, okay, she kind of said it in a way where it was like the Wookiees are actually more of a guest on the planet than the trees really are, which kind of makes sense. But I thought that was actually kind of cool. I was like, okay, so they're almost like, you know, helping out the people that actually own the planet in like a weird sense. So I thought that was kind of cool and just a very interesting thing to specify. So that could come back later, it might not, who knows. But definitely enjoyed this episode. Certainly looking forward to this two-parter. For you guys, like I said, you can watch it right now. For me, I gotta wait a little bit. But we'd love to know your thoughts on this episode, seeing Gunji come back. For me, it was like, he was in Clone Wars. I forgot about that a long time ago. Like, I forget a bunch of stuff. He popped in there. He was in, I'm sure, multiple episodes. But it's like, for me, it was just like, okay, cool. He's alive. That's sweet. But all right, I wasn't losing my mind over it like when he showed up in the trailer originally. But we'd love to know your thoughts on this, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. And because I'm really bad at this, shameless plug, I do stream. I stream on my, it's on my streaming channel. Links down in the description. You guys can check it out. Tonight, I will be finishing Dead Space, which I'm very excited to finally finish that because I feel like I barely gotten to actually play the game. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. Parts 1 and 2 are already up on this channel, so you guys can check that out. Part 3 may or may not be up by the time you guys see this, but if not, you can just hop over to the streaming channel, check out part 3. And then part 4, I will be finishing up the game. Hopefully, I should be able to finish it up by tomorrow. But 2-part episode, we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll be talking for a long time on that. We shall see. But like I said, I want to know your thoughts on this episode, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.